Hello and welcome to the Roycroft Chapel. This is our second or maybe third, depending upon how you count it, little journeys of the 2025 season. We put on the little journeys at no cost to the immortals who can join us. And so welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. Today we're going to meet the masters. It's going to be a discussion, a roundtable discussion. Tammy Fuller will host it, and she will talk to a panelist of masters about their work, maybe answer some of your questions. I'd like to acknowledge some of our sponsors. Jeremy Morlock of Fletcher French Communications is a major sponsor for us, and he provides our communication and PA assistance and technology assistance as we learn this brave new world. And also acknowledging our largest sponsor, which is the Roycroft Inn itself, who provides this space to us 6 times a year. They are our largest financial sponsor of the Roycrofters at Large Association. Also acknowledging the sponsorship of Erie County. I always like I always like to talk about the importance of this intersection in our village. It's a witness to history. Dr. Ed Godfrey used to talk about how things were when he was a kid, and he could remember the farmers and the townspeople always thinking a little bit differently about Albert Hubbard than maybe we do today. Hubbard's ideas about suffragism and marriage and fair working conditions were not always acknowledged by all of the townsfolk and farmers. It was hard to keep the farm kids on the farm when they come here and work 38 hours a week and learn how to play a musical instrument the other 2 hours a week. The baseball team was an attraction, the orchestra's theater. And so there was a lot of wondering about what went on. At that time, as the Roycroft was growing up here, and at the time that they built this chapel, there was the school across the street, and then there was a church on that corner. There was a boarding house over here on this corner that was notorious for its terrible food. And then there was over here in the Roycroft campus, the whole Albert Hubbard's whole empire. And Ed Godfrey said that the townspeople would say that over here you have, at this crossroads, you have education, salvation, starvation, and damnation. So welcome to the damnation. And let's give a welcome to our Executive Director, Tammy Fuller, who introduced the panel. Thank you for your
That may be the best introduction anyone's ever given me. Yes, of damnation. So thank you for joining us tonight at our Spring Meet the Masters Forum. So for those of you that attended our fall forum at our annual meeting, we had a very large to-do. We had 6 panelists with formal seating and et cetera and so forth. And we thought that we would try to do something a little bit more intimate this time around, to give everyone a chance to really get to meet our masters truly as we head into our 2nd year of the Little Journeys reboot, as we'd like to call it. So for those of you that are just joining us on live stream or from away, Little Journeys was a proper part of our educational programming here on South Grove for at least a decade. It was an integral part of our community outreach and our educational programming. So it was a real pleasure to bring this back last year and to present opportunities time and again to get a more intimate glimpse into the lives and the thoughts behind these Roycroft masters that are working right here in our community. I want to make clear that I was trying to organize my thoughts this afternoon. We often refer to the people that are about to join us tonight as our masters in our PR and our strategy, but that is not really strictly true. The Roycroft Renaissance Artisans and Masters that we're talking with tonight are part of a group of masters in their mediums that have been passionately preserving and holding safe the traditions of the Roycroft for nearly 50 years. We will be celebrating our 50th anniversary in 2026. The process of achieving the mark, as we refer to it, is grueling, and the path to master is even more so. The process is not something that everyone can conform to or to meet the merit of. We don't use this term lightly, and we don't lend that title lightly. It is at minimum a 5-year commitment to constant improving excellence. So in reality, it's very often closer to 10 years before one can qualify fully as an artisan and achieve the constant standards that we require to jury as a master, which some people will be doing this weekend, which is why we are all here in East Aurora on the first full weekend of April. To maintain a master's mark also requires periodic reaffirmation and jurying. It's not a resting idly on your laurels. So for many, being a Roycroft master is a lifelong evolving conversation between themselves and their work, their own internal critiques, and then the external critiques of their peers. So they take their work seriously, and we take our work as stewards seriously as well. So this Saturday, the masters that we're talking with tonight will gather with their peers for our annual jury, where they will review the work of prospective new artisans that want to join our community, reaffirm the quality of current artisans, and decide whether to promote those eligible for master to the next level of their Roycroft careers. So thanks to this event, we have CJ Hurley and Holly Bird here among us, joining us from far away. CJ far away, but Holly even more so from Florida. So tonight we get to enjoy a quiet and more intimate space and the treat of their presence to hold this conversation. They're joined in forum by our 2 local masters, Patty Cancilla and Peter Potter, who should be familiar to all and are familiar faces to those present. The panel has been designed as an organic conversation amongst peers, and it will be supplemented from time to time by prompts by myself, both with questions that I think are of interest, but also questions that the panelists have submitted to me ahead of time that they think would be of interest to the larger community. These panelists will also be open to questions from the audience and those assembled, so this is a proper opportunity to meet the masters. So join me, please, in welcoming tonight Holly Bird. Patty Cancilla. And Peter Potter. So you could all join me here at one of these tables. We will make some basic tables, chairs, you know. We will get going. So Holly Bird is an etching and relief printmaker instructor at the
Dunedin, Florida.
Dunedin, Florida, the Dunedin Fine Arts Center in Dunedin, Florida, with an extensive background as an art director and an illustrator in magazine publishing, television news, broadcast design, and as a storyboard artist in the film industry. She's been a Roycroft artisan in printmaking since 2010 and achieved master status in 2015. Besides being a Roycroft Renaissance Master Artisan at Large, which for those that aren't familiar is why we are called the Roycrofters at Large, she is a signature member of the American Society of Marine Artists. Bird lives in Tampa Bay area of Florida with her husband, mother, and a very lazy chocolate lab, whose name she didn't share.
Very much so.
When not teaching, she worries about hurricanes, reads a lot of science fiction, and tries to get in a little sailing. And I am just, you'll bear with me a quick moment. I'm just trying to get my hotspot set up so I can pull up the notes for the next speakers. I seem to have a problem with my printed. The irony that I'm having a problem with the printed word in Hubbard's chapel is not lost on me. And I know enough about the man that he's probably laughing somewhere right now. So Patty Cancilla is self-taught in her technique. She's well regarded in the Western New York art scene as a creator of one-of-a-kind jewelry designs using wire wrapping, which she's been doing since 1995. Patty's handmade settings are created directly on the stone using 14-karat gold filled or sterling silver wire and using a technique similar to weaving with precious metal. While all of Patty's pieces are one of a kind, of special interest are her pieces made with reclaimed hand-cut Roycroft pottery, used with exclusive permission from the Roycroft Inn. She's wearing this evening. She is the only artist with the rights to do so, and her pendants, necklaces, and earrings are in high demand both here in Western New York and on the national arts and crafts level. She prides herself on a drive to be meticulous and ever expanding in her designs with the goal of constant improvement and perfection of her craft. She's an award-winning jewelry maker and has been the recipient of the Allentown Purchase Award. Patty has been a Roycroft Master Artisan in jewelry since 2006. We are joined from away by CJ Hurley, who's a familiar presence for most of you who have been here for a while. CJ is an artist and designer known professionally as Century Arts Design and Fine Art Studio based in Oil City, Pennsylvania, where he works and holds his practice with his wife and business partner, Barbara. Hurley trained in art at Guildford College. His current work explores composition, watercolors, and India ink to achieve the intricate detail that he's known for. In addition to his studio practice, he is regarded for his commissioned custom painting interiors, projects that allow him to blend his love for architecture and design. These projects conducted across the United States incorporate symbolic content inspired by architecture, nature, and things meaningful to his clients. Members will recall he was the subject of the most recent newsletter Spotlight, where we talked about the intersection of arts and crafts with Eastern arts philosophy that carries through his work. In 2005, he was accepted as a Roycroft Renaissance Artisan in painting and has been a master in painting since 2008. Peter Potter, known locally here in lots of different circles, is our former president, current treasurer, and he is a Roycroft Renaissance Master Artisan in the medium of photography. His influences include Rick Jennings, Charles Birchfield, and R. Crumb. In addition to his work as a photographer, excuse me, he is also a lecturer and educator. He is presented at the 200th anniversary of John Ruskin's birth, a talk of photography in the early arts and crafts era on the Roycroft campus, and has been an invited speaker at the National Arts and Crafts Conference in Grove Park in Asheville, North Carolina. So we welcome these artists and masters here today to have an organic and fluid conversation about points that they feel are of interest to both their personal practices and then the movement at large. So my first question that was submitted
Can I
was,
ask a question?
yes, please.
Do we have to use the microphone? Is this being recorded or, because I project pretty well?
You do project pretty well. I would say if you just hold it down, we are live streaming at large.
Audience of dozens.
Our adoring public really wants to hear what you have to say. We have a number of questions that were submitted to us ahead of time. What I am most interested in is I was trying to organize my thoughts around what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about, honestly, about community in art being that we're gathering here ahead of our jury where we gather together, which is really the only time that most masters are together in the same place. What does it mean to be a Roycroft artisan or a Roycroft master? For those of you like CJ who occupy multiple bends within their art world, their art identities.
Did you want me to speak first?
Yeah.
Um, that's an overwhelming question. The gathering for the jury, the community of the Roycrofters, really came to me as a really spectacular surprise in my journey as an artist, because it's such a dedicated group to quality and hand craftsmanship. And it's just something that in my past and art training wasn't really necessarily on the table. You know, I think that when I was training, that drawing was pretty important and well encouraged, but like this dedication to craft and techniques from the past that could be lost to human knowledge as the world continues to develop is really a remarkable thing, and something that, as I moved forward in the art world in the past, just became less and less significant in the art circles that I was traveling in. And to find this group and be able to interact and have like this support structure where they get the importance of those traditions without it having to be some kind of replication of the past, I think is really a unique aspect of the contemporary art world, especially in light of what we don't know that's coming with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, actually, my, really, everything CJ's saying is along my lines too, because I had, when I first came across Rolla, was back in the 90s, and I was visiting the campus. My in-laws live up here, my husband's from Buffalo. And I saw some emotional things by Rolla, some work. I just remember having that aha moment that this might be my tribe, that a group of artists that really are dedicated to that, you know, again, the craftsmanship, the traditional methods, the look and feel of a certain era that I had already, didn't even know how much I loved until, and I didn't identify it until much later in my career, because I realized, looking back at my high school, early college work, I was already kind of doing arts and crafts, Jugendstil, Art Nouveau style. And I knew something about it, but I didn't know enough about it. And then all of a sudden I discovered this group of people who were really, and the campus, and the philosophy behind it, and the arts and crafts movement, and Boris, and inspiring the American movement, and emphasizing that level of craftsmanship in, as a pushback against the Industrial Revolution and against automation and everything. We find ourselves now in a similar era. And I also had a kind of an interesting arc coming into Rolla along those lines, because I was a digital artist for the longest time. I worked as an art director. I was in the film business and television news, and I was a paint box artist, and I was a soft homage 3D animator. And it was all Mac all the time, all, you know, SGIs and everything, and animation. And I really missed drawing. And that's, taking that first printmaking course for the first time since college, and I fell in love all over again with it. And realized that there was a group of people back in New York. I was down in Florida. I've lived in Florida most of my life, and seeing the work of Laura Wilder, for one, down in Florida, because her work was down in a gallery down there, is when I first made the connection between Laura was a member of Rolla. I had seen Rolla up here. I wanted to do stuff like those guys. So, yeah, similar art.
And you know, for me, I think there's that, the striving for excellence in my own personal work. And, you know, that applies to other avenues of my life as well, right? And it's that striving to go one step better than what I did yesterday, or when I sit down to do a design. But in this community, and mine started maybe first with Thomas way back when, years ago. There was a sense for me of peer pressure. I know that sounds pretty basic, but I felt because of my peers that I was being driven to do better. Challenged, where that wasn't in any other, and some other art, because I'm in a lot of the art shows that I do. And for me, like when I leave the winter show for the Roycroft Artisans, I'm highly inspired for my next year, the designs that are going to come in. I have to do so much better. And even in a master, I'm thinking, look at what they're doing. And it's a striving for excellence is really what it is. And you see that in, you know, from the artisans, but in the master level, especially, where people just go that next step. They go to, and people say to me, how do you know when a piece is done? You know, or, and I can speak about that and say, when in my eye, it's you know, there is no timeline. It just has to be right. And you see that at the master level as well. And people in the community, when they, because I do a lot of these public art shows around here, maybe like 10 of them, and they see that sign and they say, now I know why there's that sign, when they start to look at the master artisans that perhaps are in that show, and maybe it's a big public show, not a Roycroft show, and they say, now I understand why. And I'm not elevating myself like I'm some great artist or anything, but people understand the mark and they understand the level of pursuit of what you're trying to attain when you work on a piece. And for me, it's taking, and yes, I have a business, so there's a financial aspect to it that I'm doing some of the designs, right? But it's always to bring something out new for my clients. So, because it's jewelry, you know, something new, something to, you know, to move forward in, so that those designs are fresh. So that somebody wants to continue to purchase them. So there is a business aspect that I have, you know, having a business degree. But I think it's that striving towards, it's not done till it's done. And I'm sure you all feel that when you do your pieces. And then then I can present it to the public. But I love the peer pressure of the Roycroft Artisans. I function better personally under pressure. The more I have to do, the better I'm going to do. And so I love that about the Master Artisans, looking towards their work.
Very much so. By the way, that talk about art shows, when you see you have the mark hanging up in your booth,
Yeah.
and people comment on it. There's never been an art show I've done in Florida where somebody didn't walk up at least one or two, recognize the sign, and you know, we're ecstatic to find a Roycroft artisan down in Florida. So that mark has a lot of roaming power.
Yeah.
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 It really is community. I can remember when the organization started in 1976. I'm a lifelong resident of East Aurora, thus far. And so as I saw the beginning of the organization, I was just a kid getting out of college, getting thrown out of college at that time. And I thought it was sort of interesting then. And as time went on, I thought, you know, perhaps I could make a case to appeal to this organization. I'm very glad I did. I love the community. I love what we're doing now, especially where we've really started to look at our mission, and a program that Tammy came up with when she first started helping us out as a volunteer was the emerging artisan program. We have three people here tonight that are fellows of that organization, of that program. I usurp Tammy's pride of that, just as I think we've offered those people a fine welcome. And Holly and I were talking about how what a great structure that is in a guild like or an apprenticeship like spirit. And
I think it's so important to have that, incorporate that in part of the structure too, because part of it is passing on what we.
exactly.
Just to give some context, when I started volunteering with Rolla, it was because I was an apprentice of Thomas Papp. I had wandered somewhat glibly into his wood shop and said, "Hey, I need to make crochet needles. Can you help me?" And he laughed at me very kindly, but he did laugh at me. Now I realize the ridiculousness of that experience, but he did offer to lend me use of his equipment if I promised to be careful and not hurt myself and make it myself. And thereupon it started a whole progression of mentorship where I eventually started working with them to train. As a fiber artist myself, I often make unearthly wax pieces. So I needed to know that to understand the context of my work. And it was through those conversations and that mentorship. And honestly, your emerging artists was at best a collaboration, is probably better attributed to Thomas. Because at that time he wanted to bring more people into the organization for exactly the reasons that you're talking about now. And I think it is one of the finest things that we do, is bring in people that may otherwise stay away from Rolla or the Roycroft mark because it is so intimidating. But there is so much to impart to people, even artists like myself that are working and doing good quality work, just the fit and finish and understanding how to conform to a larger philosophy, or maybe conform isn't the right word, especially in this particular atmosphere, but at least to gain some foundation from a larger community. So as far as community goes, we're almost 50 years strong at this point. A lot of people that are new to the movement may not really understand, and we hear this a lot, is that, well, if I don't work in arts and crafts style, it's really not going to do it. But I think this is a nice segue into, CJ, one of your questions that you proposed to me, and something that you thought you might be interested to talk about. You use the phrase artful living on all or most of your promotional material. What does this mean to you? I have a feeling that it intersects with
well, maybe not. So I might have to address that separately. The artful living moniker that we use is kind of loaded for me, because it sits on so many levels. And there's such a rich depth that can be gleaned from the arts and crafts movement and its continuing legacy. And for me, I think the key to what Barbara and I are trying to get at with artful living is quietude. This kind of sense of being able to just step back from all of the chaos of the world and get deep into the heart of things. And the original arts and crafts movement was very much about that in its reaction to the Industrial Revolution. And although there's a lot of complaints in modern society of all those old arts and crafts houses, they're so dark, that was an intentional invention to kind of be able to close out the really what was a cutthroat kind of world at that time. And in the revival of the arts and crafts movement, we're kind of in a similar position today. There's a lot of chaos out there in the world that I think it's important for people to be able to take a healthy step back from. And for Barbara and I, it all starts in the home. The home is the one place that you can safely say right now that you might have some agency in this world. You know, if you go out in the working world and you don't work for yourself and you have to answer to someone else, you don't necessarily have agency. But in your home, you have agency. So it's a wonder to be able to just come home and step across that threshold and let yourself be transformed in another world. So for us in our work, the kind of artful living on the most simple side of things can start as easily as with color. Because color has a huge psychological impact on us. And you can step through that threshold and surround yourself with colors that will start altering your mindset from the day that you just spent out in the greater world. And then that whole artful living statement can then slowly be added upon with the furnishings you choose and maybe the rugs you pick and the window treatments. And, you know, finally, it can come down to the art that you hang on your walls or the murals or the wallpaper even. And then, you know, it's a conscious effort that we make to transform our lives, you know, and so, you know, I look at it as like your home can be an invitation to just settle in, get into your most comfortable chair, pour a glass of wine, glass of scotch, if that's your thing, and just sit back and find some stillness. Look at, you know, the wallpaper on your walls, if you have a mural, if you have art, just, you know, take that moment to not just have this understanding that you have this thing. Take this moment to just experience it, contemplate it, look at that piece of art and let it take you to another place. You know, I think it's just really important. And you know, and part of this, you know, for me is all embroiled in my interest in Far Eastern religious traditions and meditation and contemplation and setting aside time to really let yourself go deep. You know, the artful living ultimately encompasses this attitude of life, of taking agency for yourself and setting a tone for you to just get really centered and grounded back into what's important to you, so that when you go back out into the chaotic world, you can maybe have the juice behind it to deal with it better.
Can I comment into that? It's interesting because a lot of times people say to me, you must have a lot of patience to do this tedious little work with my hands, right? Because they just go like this. And I say, no, it's not, that's not, it's the opposite. If I don't work, I find, the patience is, it's the opposite. I don't have patience to do the work. The work brings that sense of calmness. And when I do that, and then I get a little edgy when I don't get into doing something creative. And, and I do work in my home and I've learned to shut off, everything else in the home, like the dirty laundry and all that, but my life, other than when I'm in my studio, is very fast. We have 9 grandchildren, I teach at other, I do some teaching and all that, and I'm constantly on the go, my daily schedule that I write out. And then when I come into my studio, then it's a halt. And it is finding that
Stillness.
but for me, the patience is, it's not just that I have to have a lot of patience. I receive that calmness when I begin to work
You want it.
by myself. I don't want to talk to
It's
anybody,
desirable.
I don't really want to talk to anybody. I want to just kind of have that alone time, so.
And then getting into that flow, I was just thinking about what you were saying about patience. My printmaking mentor, Stephen Littlefield, down at Dunedin Fine Arts Center, when he retired, he asked me to take over teaching his classes, 17. And I started, for the first time since college, I started taking printmaking with him about 2004 or 5. And one of the first things when I first met him, he had a block print, and he made a T-shirt with it, and it said "The Ecstasy of Tedium," and that completely described his joy of carving, getting into that groove, the flow of carving these linoleum blocks, printing. And printing was almost like it's the extra bonus. You get a print out of it, because for him, it was the skill building, the pursuit of, skill, learning a skill. Becoming excellent in a skill requires effort. The effort is desirable. The ecstasy of tedium is something he truly enjoys. Yeah, and I learned that from him.
Ecstasy of tedium.
Yeah.
That's probably gonna get repeated around.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that. I'll tell him. Yeah.
I couldn't but notice as you were talking. It's almost as though the work draws the patience out of you.
It does, it's just, it's the opposite, I don't have to have patience for it. When I go in, that's when I find I have it. So it's, people say that all the time to me, it's very interesting.
A little bit, my, biggest challenge is, uniting my technical equipment, my digital camera to the tradition. And one of the ways that many of the ways that I do that is by creating compositions that honor the tradition and also the presentation. And that the presentation is the real the mats and the frames and the fitting of that is where I find the routine and I take great satisfaction in just getting a dust cover on the back and where it isn't rumpled, and just the little things like that that really honor the tradition.
I did want to make a quick note as an observer, CJ. You had said that you don't really know that the artful living question intersected with the question about arts and crafts, but as you were talking, and for those of you that attended CJ's talk last year, I believe it was actually in April, so it's been a whole year. CJ delivered one of our first little journeys, and it was about the foundation of the arts and crafts movement as an extension of Romanticism. And it was founded as an early labor reform movement. So as you were talking about all of these feelings about homes drawing you in, the experience of the thing, to let it take you away, to pull you back, and to let yourself go deep. One could argue that that is actually the foundational philosophy of the original arts and crafts movement. So in a very real sense, the work that you're doing now in 2025 is harkens back without having to copy the style explicitly. It's something that is carried forward by the philosophy. Whether you're doing it in digital photography, or you're carving out prints, or you're photographing.
It's a template in a lot of ways that can be overlaid whatever you're pursuing.
So, there aren't, a lot of artists that do what you do, Patty. What was the motivation for the specific type of technique that you landed on?
I wanted to stay home and raise my children without hiring someone. I wanted to be home and have a business, and so I looked for that, or it kind of just fell in that technique where I don't have to solder and have the smell, or you have turpentine, because I have a background in painting, I have a background in woodworking, all these different things. And so I wanted to create an environment that I could pick it up, put it down, pick it up while raising my 3 children. And I was very fortunate and blessed that my husband had a good job that I was able to do that. But my motivation was to raise my children. And then eventually that grew into a full-time job. And then part of my background, my dad had a lumberyard. So he trained me in cutting, wood. I would have to do everything. I would have to go on construction sites. I would have to do all that. And I would have to work on every saw. And so using what I learned when I was younger in cutting like the china now and the glass, it was like a natural progression. But the primary motivation was to raise my children. And I could work on things no matter where I was at. The technique was something that I could just play with and work on. And now again, it's more of quite a bit more business because all the kids are gone, but I wanted to be able to pick it up, take it. And so that was really my motive. How can I be home and I work at home and not be out in the work, which I was out in the community working.
And I find this so interesting because when I talk about the history of the arts and crafts movement in printmaking with my students, the path for women getting into printmaking in the early 20th century, late 19th century, especially with the advent of linoleum in 1890. And I think by 1895, I think that might be the first linoleum print we can document in America. I'm not sure who, Arthur Wesley Dow, I can't remember. But women artists who were raising their children at home were able to go ahead and turn printmaking, it's Albrecht Durer's business model of multiples and work on the tabletop,
Work anywhere.
Work anywhere.
My technique, right.
And that particular technique with the kind of printmaking they were doing back then with Frances Gerhardt and a lot of the women, it was a tabletop kitchen enterprise for a lot of them, and it allowed them to make money while they were raising their children.
That's right. That's
And you
exactly.
didn't need a press.
And you did not need a press.
Right. And
With
I
this
didn't
method.
need
You could use a
chemicals or-
Yes,
right.
you could just use a baron or a wooden spoon.
Exactly.
Yep.
Is it linoleum because it's made out of linseed oil?
Well, linoleum, you think about it at the time because Japanese woodcuts were hugely influential on the movement in printmaking. And you think about, say, you're a woman, you're there with your family, now you have to go to the lumber yard and look for a perfectly flat, planed piece of wood that's adequate, you couldn't just go to Home Depot back then. But when linoleum came out, here's this floor covering that was put out there because it was the new sanitary, floor covering for kitchens and hospitals and everything. And somebody realized how easy it was to carve and how available it was to have this perfectly flat surface to use in printmaking and carving. It's that accessibility of materials that revolutionized printmaking for everyday people, everyone. It wasn't the Japanese method of the 5-person team. It was that one artist, particularly women, and especially, and this is what I love about the collection down at Macklin, Museum of American Arts and Crafts Movement. a majority of the artists in that print collection down there are women. Because it was a business model and, it's kind of lost my train of thought there where I was, but the material really was kind of part of the revolution of being able to do this. And one of the other
And
things.
the material change, so the women
Material
could do
changed,
it,
so that
and yet
women could do
still
it.
raise their children.
And still
They
raise
could do it on the tabletop,
Yeah.
and that's exactly the type of material they look for.
Right.
How can I do this? I have this,
Yeah.
desire to create. I can see it in my head. How can I do it
how can I
without
make this work?
hurting the air for my
Right.
children with
Right.
chemicals or,
Right.
putting them in whatever it was, soldering. I didn't want anything dangerous like
Right.
that. But I wanted to be able to do it on my kitchen table while the baby's sleeping right
Right.
there. And it was that desire to create
Mhm.
and yet not having a suitable,
Exactly.
avenue to do it. So I
Like
created,
a small print footprint,
created.
but yet, something you can monetize easily.
Right.
And in the same way, the other aspect of this with women printmakers were, many of them painted, like Margaret Patterson. That painting goes out the door, never to be seen again, especially in the days before any kind of reproduction. But if you copy it and turn it into a print, now you can go ahead and monetize that same image that you worked so hard on. And again, women painters did not find opportunities as much to exhibit and sell, but then that secondary income coming in from printmaking. So it was a two-pronged thing and very much supported women who were stay-at-home moms. Yeah.
So, Holly, for you, you and I were speaking a little bit before we started. And I was really intrigued by we got off on a thought you had mentioned to me that printmaking, as we all know, is having a moment of resurgence. And you attributed some of that to the rise of social activism and things right now.
In schools.
In schools and in young communities where people are hungry for a way to disseminate messaging.
Yes.
And then printmaking is this very wonderful, pretty tactile. So, can you expound a little bit on that for the?
Prior to this resurgence, you could hardly give away a press in the early 2000s. They were all over Craigslist and eBay. And then all of a sudden on campuses, there was a revival and kids discovered Goya and they discovered the posters of the time, the early 20th century, psychedelia posters in the music industry and just the punchy impact of linoleum and a couple of prominent printmaker professors. I want to call him Fisk, and I can't remember, but there's Evil Prince in St. Louis, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he started doing these boot camps, and they would take a group of students, young people to Home Depot. They'd purchase a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and they would do this grueling 4-day boot camp in a garage. Basically, and carve this thing, and it would be the most direct sort of angry, alive, kind of printmaking, and then print them on this gigantic press. And then that started circulating around the internet, and there were a few Facebook groups that started picking up on it. And then there was this explosion all of a sudden on campus. And I can also attribute some of that to drive-by press. So there were these two grad students, and their thesis would be that they bought this old station wagon, they built a portable press and put it in the back, and they picked out several colleges that did not have a printmaking program. And they financed the whole operation, their gas money, by printing t-shirts and block prints while they were there, and they gave lectures. And so they came to the Lipa Museum in Florida, in Tarpon Springs, in 2008. And they had, everywhere they went, like Johnny Appleseed, they were sprouting these programs where these kids, 20s, teens were doing these amazing large format block prints and linocut prints. And they were finding that some of the students were finding like, well, I need better drawing skills to do this. So that also is part of this sort of revival in the need to find drawing classes, because we kind of got away from that in the 70s. I certainly, at University of Florida, they were very hostile to drawing programs that did representational art and illustration. But right about this, I guess various forces came together at this time, and there were angry students, and they found a way to do this really direct form of protest. The other thing you can do with them, they discovered, is that you can print them on mulberry and just kind of plaster them up all over the place around town as completely non-destructive graffiti. I mean, they wash off, they peel off in rain. So there really was this moment, and all of a sudden, presses got expensive again.
Yeah.
But linoleum got expensive. You could, linoleum was pennies, and all of a sudden, everyone, what's going on with linoleum? So, yeah, and now there's Big Ink, which is going, which has a huge 95-inch press, which is portable. They call it Big Tuna. And they come into an art center in town, and they put out, you apply to go ahead and be accepted to Big Ink. And then you go out there and you carve your massive 4x8 print, and you have about 3 months to do it. And then they're all printed on massive pieces of masa and distributed, and Big Ink keeps one. You get the other 4 in the addition to do with whatever you will. They get shown at universities and art centers, and then again, it just keeps reseeding itself over and over again.
That's brilliant.
Really organically,
About coming back to center.
really came back to life. And I've been happy to teach those students, and that we've had come to the art center. Yeah.
That's really interesting, to have come circle on that, and then
Mhm.
also come circle on arts and crafts. And
Yes,
labor reform and the
Labor
social
reform.
activism that was inherent in.
William Morris, everything.
Yeah,
you know.
all of
Yep,
that.
yep. And
Very-
you'll find it, that same tradition, just again, it's funny how the materials and the craft, the method is kind of part of it. It's more interesting. You talk to them and they say how excited they are to carve whatever it is that they're trying to say, instead of just taking a magic marker and just writing it out or
Yeah.
spray painting it. And again, there's the multiples. There's Albert Durr's business model, because you can keep printing off more and share with your friends and plaster them all over the, school. So, again, it's very adjacent to the arts and crafts movement. And again, the labor movement, and also the ability to speak out and share something.
It'll be interesting to see how that kind of evolves as CJ mentioned a couple of minutes ago, as we start to embrace what it means to the AI art model
Mhm.
interjecting onto the public spaces. Anything to add on this topic? So, not to pick on CJ, but,
But to pick on CJ.
Pick on CJ. We see him here so rarely. One of the things that I noticed, that, in all your work, you had mentioned to me that, there's hand painted friezes, there's, highly stylized nature paintings, there's landscapes. You cover a wide range of subject matter. And I guess you're getting ready to unveil a new series of more spiritual based art. I know that a lot of your art has spiritual undertones, even if it's not obvious. But can you talk a little bit about, what connects all of those different things that you do?
Yeah, that comes relatively easily for me. And the undertone of everything I do is symbolism. Since I started making art, pretty much I've been some type of symbolist. And the symbolist movement that happened in art in the 1890s was certainly a big draw for me. And so no matter what medium I'm working in, there's usually some kind of symbolic content going on in the background. And it's interesting because, I just mentioned the symbolist movement in the 1890s, but it seems like all the art that I've been interested in throughout my life has had some kind of symbolist content behind it, like in Japanese art, which has a huge influence on me. There's all kinds of, representations of flowers and animals and other motifs that have a symbolic meaning behind them that's bigger than it just being an image of, let's say, a bunny rabbit or a chrysanthemum or a stand of bamboo. And I don't go as far as the Chinese, but there was a whole period in China during one of the transitions from one era to the next and one regime to the next, where you had all these reclusive, like, you know, they're kind of crazy, Taoist calligraphers and poets and painters that were doing like these highly intricate Chinese ink paintings. And Chinese painting isn't about representing things as you see it. Calligraphy is really the root of Chinese brush painting. So different marks that you make in calligraphy have meanings associated with them. So they're making these paintings and they're putting all these little tiny marks inside of them. And if you knew how to read those paintings, they were embedding in them secret encoded messages to the you know, like the freedom fighters and the revolutionaries. So, you know, there was like this whole, you know, so I just have this fascination with symbolism, and it's a big part of my art. And it was a big part of the arts and crafts movement. I mean, they weren't making wallpapers with different motifs for no reason. You know, there were associations with the different motifs that they used, and so one of the things that shows up in my art a lot is and it comes from my Far Eastern religious studies, like Buddhism primarily, but generally, like if I create a landscape, it's not just a landscape that I saw. I make sure that I'm trying to include all of the constituent parts that make up the macrocosm of the universe, which, you know, this is kind of like Asian art tradition as well. So you'll notice that there's a prevalence of rocks in my paintings. And a lot of this relates back to Japanese gardening as well. And then usually there's some kind of representation of water, and then the plants come in. And essentially I'm looking at, like, you know, some Buddhist things, some Hermetic, you know, Western Hermeticism, et cetera, traditions, and incorporating these things that represent the earth, the water, the air, the fire, and you know, emptiness. And so that's kind of a symbolic backdrop that you'll often see in my landscapes. And, you know, and if you don't know that you're looking for it, you know, you don't necessarily know it's there, but it's kind of like the backdrop to what's occurring in there. And if I looked at a real landscape and all of those elements weren't in there, I'm going to make sure that they get put in there. Not exclusively, but for the most part. Yeah.
So all the work is connected.
Yeah.
So, Patty, how has your work evolved over time, and what motivates your designs today? We've heard from CJ about how he's motivated by those sorts of ideas.
Well, you know, first, like I was saying, over time, it began with skill sets that I learned when I was younger from my dad, like cutting wood at a lumberyard. I grew up basically in a lumberyard, cutting wood. And then over time, like I've done stained glass, I've used that skill set that I learned when I was younger. So that's a natural thing to just take a cup and rip it apart and cut it into little pieces. And what motivates my design is what I was saying in the beginning, to do something that I haven't done before. To take the technique to a level that's a little more difficult every time I do it. So a lot of times people will say to me, how long did it take you to do that piece? And maybe it's an elaborate piece. And I say, well, that took me 30 years. It took me 30 years to learn that technique, to do that process, you know, of a million wires converging to become a beautiful, huge, elaborate pendant. So it is always when I sit down to do something different. I don't know if there's boredom. There's certain, probably not, you know, but I wanna, you know, there's certain inventory that I keep steady in stock, but it's to constantly have something new. So my motivation is to challenge myself when I sit down and I do a design, and to move my hands in such a way, and to learn how to use, but I know that sounds silly, to learn how to use both hands and to just create this thing, and my face is right in it, and then something different comes out. And it sounds so silly.
No,
It's
not
just,
at all, not at all.
and all of a sudden I'm just working on it, and I'm looking at it, and I'm moving my hands in such a way,
One thing leads to the
and
other.
it just leads and it comes out, and they're all different. They're never the same. I don't, unless it's two earrings, and I try to do them, you know, of course,
Yeah.
mirror image.
Mhm.
But it is to really strive to do something different, and I think that's what this group inspires. To do it, to take it to the next level, to not just have this basic design, which I still have in my inventory, but to have a little more advanced, to have it more advanced, and to have these very elaborate pieces. And I call them my princess pieces, you know? And so I think it's that strive to continually, challenge myself, upgrade, and I love to upcycle things. Creatively, I do beautiful, well, I shouldn't say beautiful, but, people bring me their cherished heirlooms that my hands are on, and they're crying when they hand it to me because their mother passed away, or the grandmother, and I'm ripping it up on a saw. So I know it's a reverence in a sense for the things of the past. I worked on, a piece that came out of the fire from that flight 3407. She lives here in East Aurora. She contacted me because I was a Roycroft Master Artisan. Think about how cherished that is. They were broken, heat shattered pieces of a teapot that was a remnant that the man that died on the ground, had, you know, and that's the only pieces the daughter had, were these heat shattered pieces of broken pottery. And I was able to cut it, work on it, you know, and then give it back to them. I would never charge them for anything like that. But so there is this, when I'm working with people, you know, people's teacups and things like that, there is a sense of, this is an heirloom, and not just the Roycroft pottery. I do more work with people that are crying, that are handing me something.
They entrusted you.
They entrust me with these pieces. That was, and that flight 3407, that heat shattered
Yep.
teapot, to be entrusted with something like that, because I was a master artisan, and she lives here. That lady lives in East Aurora. I did, you know, I went and picked up the pieces reverently, and I delivered them to her. So to be inspired to work on, those are, for me, the nicest things to work on, the things I love working on. I'm working on it now, where people have grandma, and they're gonna end up with a little beautiful, you know, cherished piece. So that is really what I love working on. That's my custom work. You know, is to take something that was loved by someone else and repurpose it. It's beautiful, but again, to talk to that lady and her daughter just cried when she received that little part of it. When her father passed away. So that's the inspiration.
Profound inspiration.
It's a beautiful thing. And again, to be entrusted with that is, you know, I
It's great.
reverently work on those, you know, I do reverently work on those precious things. I'm working on an order now. So.
Art. Yep.
It's art. But then there's also there's that, you know, the heirloom to it. There's a memory. I'm working on a memory for someone, you know, and one lady came and gave me a piece of coal. And it was when her son died and he was 4, and it was what they found in his pocket. He was a little stone collector and it was a piece of coal. And she saved all these little stones that he collected and he passed away. And here I'm sure, you know, I'm working on these little artifacts, little things that have a memory for someone else. And I get to be a part of it. I get to be a part of that and present them in a beautiful box or wrapped in silver or gold. This cherished thing that she's wearing in her heart, which was a little piece of coal she found in her son's pocket when he died. I mean, so I get the stories. I love that. And that is a motivation to do that work perfectly and excellent, you know, in a way. And I feel very privileged to be a part of that, as well as the Roycroft pottery and the, you know, the history behind that. But when it's actually attached to a story of someone's life, and then they wear it and they wear it next to their heart, that's the reason they're doing that. They're wearing it next to their heart. I mean, the privilege and the honor is to do that. So. Yeah.
Before we open up for questions and we kind of start to edge toward close, we got started a bit late, so we are a bit behind. Here's what's new in your world. Is there anything you're working on right now that you can speak to that you'd like to share? Motivation wise, perspective wise.
I just have a little story. You know, sometimes we just do this work. We enjoy doing it, and it inspires us. But and you know, I'm sort of a Johnny come lately to the art world, but someone had shared, you know, here's my house decorated for Christmas time, and it's someone that I sold a photograph to, and I looked at it, and it was my photograph, but I didn't recall selling her that photograph. And so I sent her a message. I said, geez, I thought I sold you another photograph. And she said, yeah. Sad story. This photograph was, my friend bought this photograph from me, and she died, and her daughter gave it to me because she knows that I like your work that much. And it was like, oh my gosh, you know. It broke me up. And so it made me more serious about work that I've done since. Yeah.
Phrase that CJ mentioned a couple of minutes ago that I made a note of, about let yourself go deep. If we're doing it properly, that's where it leads us, right? Well, before we close, I'd like to open up to anyone in the audience. Anyone have a question they'd like to pose to any of our panelists, something they've said in passing they'd like to expand on?
And all I'm looking for is just a real brief answer, but I'll ask each of you. When you were younger, what was the hook that grabbed you about doing artwork or photography? What hooked you? Do you remember something that hooked you and said, I gotta do this, I love doing this?
Yeah, easy for me. Cameras were magic. I mean, just, you know, you're creating something out of whole cloth. You know, you let light into a little room for a second, and you know, you've captured that. That magic still exists.
Yeah, it was probably watching my oldest sister make art. You know, and you know, we kind of have a craft time at home. That was pretty formative and special for me.
It was definitely my mom and dad. She was crafty. My dad was a mechanical engineer drawing. So he was always doing some drawing. She was always doing some handcrafts, always. We were making candles in the sand, you know, at the beach, flower arrangements. So very, very, very early on, I was painting. I was painting drawings. I was doing some crafts. I can't even remember. I was so young. It was just part of our household. So to do that, it was just part of our household. And then they sent me for private painting lessons and things like that. And that just progressed, so it was a natural part of our world in a sense.
I think it's really important that when you're a child, that you have some exposure. I mean, you know, either your family or a museum or a library or book. And for me, it was books. I was so lucky that my parents had books illustrated by Howard Pyle and N.C. Wyeth and a lot of the Golden Age illustrators. And then I would just my motivation was to lose myself in a drawing. I was copying Howard Pyle at like 5, 6, 7 years old, and I would Prince Valiant on the Sunday paper. I was teaching myself to draw with photographs. My dad's photographs by copying Prince Valiant, Hal Foster, and then I can't remember not Gianni, but the guy that came after Hal Foster. But part of that motivation, I realized I could lose myself in that drawing, and I could live sort of in the same way, you know, in looking at these illustrations and books and get to go live in the book by illustrating a scene in my head, listen to music. And that just simply drawing that amount, you know, as I gained confidence, I wanted to push it even farther, you know, just by having that experience of building my drawing skills. And so once I was motivated by books, talk about how we push ourselves with trying to be better at what we build our skills, you know, to be excellent at what we do. I just felt that I had to keep pushing myself to get better and better at this and to use it to eventually have a career, one way or the other.
Kudos to you. I mean, it worked.
Hopefully. It's
Still working.
Still working.
Still working.
Mhm.
Anyone else?
As masters, have done this for so long, are there periods where you just have like this eye spell, where you're trying to work on something, and
Oh, yeah.
still like a mental block, and how do you get out of that?
It's a great question. Just for those joining us remotely, the question is whether as masters you experience some dry spell or periods where you can't really motivate to create. Does that happen, and how do you get over that?
Oh, absolutely, that happens. And, you know, it's normal, you know, it happened to all of us. And, very specifically, the piece that I have, in the jury this year on Saturday is, I think it's one of the best prints I've ever done. But it took me 2.5 years through COVID to finish it. And I just could not bring myself to work on that print. But it was a technical challenge because I wonder if I can get light to bounce beneath a boat the way I see it, you know, when I go sailing out there in Florida, but do it in a woodcut, like a complete weirdo with 8 blocks and a line cut. And it just, that thing damn near killed me because it's very physical printing. But it was daunting. And I did have this fallow period during the COVID years, like, I just don't want to do that. I just want to do something really instant gratification and just, you know, just do an etching or a drawing or something. But it's hard to push yourself through, but I think just learning to relax and just realize that these periods are normal and you'll get through it, and then just move on to the next thing with that. Do something that really, give yourself some dessert, do something fun.
And I think for me, if I'm away from my craft for a little too long, when I go back in, I'm like, and I just keep repeating it until I get to that point. And I just keep working on it and keep working on it. Like, I hate that piece. I hate that piece. Okay, now I'm getting back into, because I have hand movements. So I have to keep my hands in that, you know, not only physically, you know, the strength of them, dexterity of them, just to keep going and keep moving with it. So the dry is when I'm away. But if I'm in a continual process, you know, the more I work on it, then that just brings it back up. So.
You know, of course, there are times when it's hard to find that inspiration, but you know, sooner or later, it's 2 weeks before a show and you just gotta get there.
Fallow periods.
But also, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just, you know, the editing thing is what it's 30th of a second photograph is created, and, you know, 30 hours later, the editing.
I want to ask Barbara if she knows if I've ever had a moment of not being inspired, because like sitting here off the cuff, I'm like, I don't think so. I'm always jazzed about something. I mean, if I'm not inspired on this side of things, there's always something to be inspired by. So, yeah, but I can say that sometimes when I'm in the middle of something, it starts, you know, I've had times where it starts to be a drag, because, you know, it's like super labor intensive. It's
Yeah.
Too much detail. You know, maybe there's distractions and other things that I'm concerned about, that it's hard to get that focus, but I'm never gonna make all the stuff that I have ideas for. I'll
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
yeah, so.
That's true. And CJ, do you ever have that thing where you're on deadline and you really have to knock this thing out, and all these really great ideas pop up in your brain that try to lure you away from what you're actually should be working on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get in trouble. I get in trouble because, like, you know, I'll slip off. You know,
Yeah.
we have an office and a studio, and I'll slip off to the studio and work on the thing that's jazzing me at the
Right.
time, instead of that thing
The thing you have to do.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so. Um.
All artists.
All artists.
All artists,
Mhm.
I think. All right, any other questions before we break for dinner?
I don't have a question, but I wanted to comment on Patty talking about, your art and raising your children. And one of the things I love, like, I didn't think about it until you were talking, but in the small community that we moved to, that went through a depression and is now revitalizing itself, largely through artists moving there. One of the things that I've been loving seeing recently is, the young moms building their art or other creative professions, massage therapists, healing professionals, artists, and people renting studios in our building. And like, we take our dog to work, these young people are bringing their kids to work, and many of them homeschool. So their kid comes in and is homeschooling in their studio, or kids that aren't old enough to go to school yet are coming to work with this young photographer who's built a fantastic business. And these are people that are full-time putting that's their thing, that's their income. And some of them are partners doing it together and bringing their kids. And so I, like, as you were talking, I was like, wow, like, you were a pioneer for that. And now there's this whole nother generation that is showing us that we can do it differently.
Yeah,
Because when I started my career, it was all, you know, like,
Yeah,
work.
Right, exactly, and, you know, that would be, you know, 30, 35 years ago that I did that, right? And everyone else I know, including my sisters, now that they're in full-time careers, they're making big bucks. And here I am, is like, no, I want to stop that. I want to just stay home. I mean, we, you know, financially, it was a little more challenging, but it was the priority for me to do that. But yet there was still, I had to satisfy that creative urge, you know, to create it, make something and do that. So my kids, they did crafts right along. I mean, it wasn't just me doing my artwork for my business. And I do that with my grandkids now. We do a craft when they come over. Michael paints with them when they come over. They're learning that they can use their hands and they can do that. And my kids,
And you modeled that for them.
oh yeah, and my
Yeah.
kids, I just, you know, we did crafts all the time. That was
I
just,
hope that's an inspiration for people who
Yeah.
are afraid to be full-time artists, but they want to be.
right.
That they can, you know, young people can follow your model and be parents and artists.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that in your community, because that was very challenging, you know, when I started that. Like I said, financially, it was very challenging, but it was very rewarding also.
Yeah.
You know, but again, I had a priority of what I wanted to do with our family, sure, so like when I had a priority, so.
Thank you, Barbara, for bringing us back to community. From closing our loop, started in community, we ended. So thank you, all of you, for joining us. I won't keep you here any longer. As always, Little Journeys is followed by a period of informal conversation and socializing before dinner. We invite anyone that would like to join us across the street in the library lounge while they wait for dinner service to join us. Guests who support the Roycroft community by dining at the inn following Little Journey lectures do receive a reduction in the dinner service. So please make sure that if you do that, you make sure that they know that you're because of us. And our next Little Journeys, this hasn't been made publicly available yet, will take place on June 4th, where we will welcome again artist Constance Payne. So Connie Payne is a renowned, nationally recognized artist living and working here in our East Aurora community and a very dear friend of the Roycroft Renaissance and the larger Roycroft community. Connie will present a special presentation that she specifically asked to present, a little journey to Rosa Bonheur, the most famous woman animal artist of the 19th century.
Oh, you would. One of my favorite painters.
Absolutely. Better go play.
Yeah.
Join the most, but it's not nearly
Yes.
as fun. Bonheur was acknowledged by Albert Hubbard in his Little Journeys writing, so we feel this topic is definitely on point. And a tribute to her is to this day preserved and a door plate inside the Roycroft Inn. So we'll have a tribute to that movement and that artist and everything that she represents to our community on June 4th. And so please mark your dates and come back and join us. We'll make tickets available sometime in May. And don't forget that the Roycroft Summer Festival is going to be here before you know it.
What?
Yeah.
No
I heard the festival organizers are real sticklers. Last full weekend in June, under the roof at the Classic Ring. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists tonight for joining us from across the country and close to home, and all of you immortals for joining us here. And thank you. Good night.